Hello and welcome to the QFTest video tutorial about Web UI testing with QFTest. QFTest is a tool to test applications via the UI. It supports Java, web and Windows applications as well as PDF documents. In place of all those various technologies, we will take a look at testing web applications with QFTest. The procedures and concepts shown in this tutorial are broadly the same as for the other supported technologies. You can find this tutorial in written form in the help menu of any installed version of QFTest, and furthermore on the web page of QFS in the menu Support Tutorial. The written form of this tutorial also contains explicit chapters about testing Java and Windows applications. Nevertheless, the concepts are broadly similar, as I said before. This video focuses on the first steps to test a web application with QFTest, which you can find in Chapter 2, Section 10, Working with a Sample Test Suite, in the written tutorial. In case you had already walked through other parts of this tutorial, like the Java or Windows testing part, you can find some notes about topics which may be specific for web testing at the beginning of Chapter 2. So let's start with the first section, Section 10, Working with a Sample Test Suite. We will open a sample test suite. Then we will start a browser to be ready to work with our demo application. We will take a look at 2 test cases, even a failing one. Then we will cover the topic of logging the test execution and its results. We will also discover the capabilities of getting support and browse through the documentation of QFTest. Next, we will close the browser and trigger a complete test run. And finally, we will create a test report presenting the test results of that test run. As first step, we will load the sample test suite, which is provided by QFTest. Therefore, we trigger the Open File command from the QFTest toolbar, and then we switch to the QFTest installation folder, which is C program files, QFS, QFTest, QFTest 532 in my case. This directory could be different on your system depending on how QFTest was installed. Now let's go ahead and switch to the doc folder, and there we will open the tutorial folder, and then we will find our demo test suite, which is first webtests.qft. I can now open the suite via a double click or via pressing open. Once we have loaded the sample test suite, let's take a brief glance at the UI of QFTest. At the top of the window, there is the menu bar containing actions of QFTest, like saving a test suite or specific commands supporting the tester during test development. The most important actions can also be found in the QFTest toolbar. Then we see a tab folder showing all open test suites. In my case, it's just one. It's the recently opened first WebTests QFT suite. Below the tab folder, we find the main area of QFTest, representing the content of a test suite. On the left, we see a graphical tree. In this tree, we will develop the test cases. So there we will find graphical tree nodes representing test cases, mouse clicks, verification steps, and so on. Once a node has been selected, we see its properties in the detail window on the right. And in the right bottom corner, we see the terminal area, which is intended to show the output of your application as well as of your test case. Once we open the test set node, via a double click or via pressing the arrow in front of it, we will see its content. The first node represents a setup node, which should ensure the preconditions of a test case like a running application. Then we see 2 test cases, and at the end we see a cleanup node, which is intended to fulfill the post conditions of a test case like closing the application. So such a test set node can act as a grouping node to organize test cases. Now it's time to start the browser and open the web application which you would like to test. The necessary steps reside in the setup node. Within the setup node, we find 2 sequences. A sequence node can be used to group arbitrary nodes inside a test case. So I could put a series of mouse events or mouse clicks inside such a sequence to have a better overview of my test case later. The first sequence, set global variables depending on the operating system, contains a set variable node and a couple of if nodes. The first set variable node initializes a variable client with the value car-config web. The variable client can be used to distinguish between several applications during our test run later. The if nodes contain specific information about the operating systems or the browsers on the operating systems. So this test suite is intended to be able to run on any operating system with any browser. That's why we have the if conditions here. The second sequence, start browser is necessary, is about launching the browser and finally navigating to the web application itself. The second sequence is about launching the browser and navigating to the web application. There we find a wait for client node at the beginning, which checks whether the browser is already running. If the browser isn't running, we will start it, and that's the task of the following if node. The if node contains 4 sequences again, which are all necessary to start the browser correctly. The first sequence, start web engine, configures QFTest with the information coming from the first sequence, so with all the information about the operating system and the browser. The second sequence, perform browser setting, is configuring your browser regarding necessary settings like a proxy setting or whether cookies are allowed or not. The third sequence, open browser window, is then finally navigating to the web application. And the fourth sequence, install custom web resolver, contains necessary optimization steps which will make testing of your application much easier. And that's especially important for testing web pages created by any JavaScript framework or any Ajax framework. We will learn more about this in the following sections. Okay, then let's start the browser now. Therefore, I select the Setup node and I press Start Test Run on the QFTest toolbar. Now our demo application has been started. It's the so-called Web Car Configurator, which allows the user to configure and calculate the prices of cars and their accessories. Now I'm curious about the test cases. How do the test cases look like? So what about the first test case? Let me open the first test case via double-click or pressing the arrow in front of it. And we see that the first test case contains 4 test steps. Test steps are logical parts of a test case representing a business view of those parts. So a test step is more or less a high-level part of a test case, like resetting the application, selecting something else, and then checking the final price. And those are the logical parts of the test case. The first test step, reset, is about resetting the application, which deletes the selections and inputs which have already been entered to the application. So this feature ensures a clean state at the beginning of the test run. The test step itself consists of 3 mouse clicks. So it looks like a menu action somewhere in the application, which is true because that's the file reset action. The second step selects model i5. It stands for a mouse click, which is selecting one of the models here inside the table. I guess the i5 one. The third step, select special model chairs, is selecting a special model in the special step. It contains a mouse click and a selection node. A select node is something which selects an entry in a combo box or in a pop-up list. So like this one. So there we always get select nodes. The fourth step, check final price, contains a check text node, which is actually the verification of the workflow. So here we really check the price which has been calculated, in our case the final price, to be the value $30,000. If that's fine, the test case will be marked as passed. If we get any other text, the test case will be marked as fail. And now I'm going to run this test case. So I select the test case and I press Start Test Run in the QFTest toolbar. QFTest performs that test case pretty fast, and we see that we have the expected result of $30,049 here in the final price. That's the same what we see in our check as well. If a test case passes, then we find the information about the executed test cases and their status on the right bottom in the so-called QFTest status line. So there we see the test run has been finished and one test case was executed. This guy was successful, so we have a success rate of 100%. If we stay over the icons with the mouse, we will also get a tooltip. Then let's go ahead and take a look at the second test case. The test case called second with error. So inside the test case, an error has been introduced to show the means of reporting errors in QFTest. The test case itself consists again of 4 test steps: the resetting action, the selection of the model i5, then we grant 10% discount, which happens via entering 10 to the discount text field, and then we check the final price, here for $29,000. So what could be wrong here? If we just take a look at the application, we see i5 has its price of $29,000, and if we grant 10% discount, we should end up in a price which is definitely less than $29,000, but we do check for $29,000, so we expect the test to fail, because we should get a different price here. Let's see what will happen. So we select the test case again and we run it. If an error occurs during test execution, QFTest will show a notification at the end of the test run. And here we have the notification. There we see the number of errors which occurred during the test run. In our case, it was 1 error. We see the same information in the QFTest status line on the right bottom. So we have the execution finished, 1 error occurred, which has a failing test case, which makes a success rate of 0%. But where do we see what was failing of that test case? So where do we see which steps have been executed? Where do we see the error messages in detail? Therefore, QFTest creates a so-called run log. So it's logging the execution. You can reach the run log by clicking the Show Run Log button on that notification dialog at the end of the test run. So if you press it, the QFTest run log gets opened. The QFTest run log is a dedicated window which consists of a tree on the left side and its details on the right again. You have a menu bar and a toolbar for the most common actions. So it's pretty the same like the test suite window. If one of the nodes contains an error, the nodes are marked by a red square. So that's why we see the run log being marked with that red square. We see the test case with the red square. And then we see the check final price with the red square. The resetting action, the selection, and the granting action were successful. So that's why they aren't marked by the red square. And if we want to go through the error message, we can now click through the entire tree, or we use the toolbar action Find Next Error, and then we directly jump to the error message. And there we see we expected $29,000, but we got $26,100. In addition to that error message, QFTest also creates screenshots from the moment once the error appeared. So here we have the screenshot of the main window, which shows the application once again. And depending on the number of desktops and monitors you have connected, you see screenshots of the connected monitors. So in my case, I have two further desktops. That's why I have 2 screenshots here. So you can reach the run log from the notification dialog at the end of the test run. You can also open the run log via the QFTest toolbar button, Open Last Run Log, or via the keyboard shortcut Ctrl L. And there is even a 4th way, which is the menu 1, and there you see the latest 4 run logs from the latest executions of QFTest. And the latest one is, of course, the first one. After we have seen how to run a test case in QFTest and how the test results are logged even with error messages, let's take a look at the documentation of QFTest. So where can we find the description how to open a run log or an explanation about the test case node and its details? To get this information, the help menu is very useful. There you find the written form of the tutorial, as well as a link to the manual, which is a full functional reference of every feature and concept in QFTest. And you can open the online search of QFTest. And the online search is a pretty powerful feature to browse through the entire documentation provided by QFS on the QFS web page. So if you enter a search string here, like error, and press on search, every means of documentation, like the manual, the tutorial, the blogs, the mailing list, and so on, will be browsed through and you will find the matches, whatever you looked for here on the online search page. This is a really comfortable way of gathering information. Besides the help menu, you can also find the what's this menu entry in any context menu of QFTest. So if you press the what's this menu entry in the context menu of a tree node, QFTest will open the manual and will jump directly to the explanation of the node which you have clicked at. And the context menu is also available in the details of any node. So if you would like to know what's the meaning of the attribute name for separate run log, you can open the context menu there, press what's this there, and QFTest will jump to the corresponding chapter in the manual. Of course, you may get in touch with the QFS support team if you have questions which you can't solve by browsing through the documentation. During the testing phase of QFTest, and if your company owns a maintenance contract, the support is for free. Coming back to our demo test suite, we need to complete our tour through the test suite by taking a look at the last node of the test suite, which is the cleanup node. A cleanup node is intended to close the browser at the end of the test run. So it consists of a stop client node, which is actually closing the browser, and a second node, wait for process to terminate, which waits till the process really disappeared. Instead of using a stop client node, I could have recorded closing the browser itself, but a stop client node is actually the same. And if we run the cleanup node, we will see the browser disappearing. As we know all parts of the test suite now, the setup node to fulfill the preconditions, the two test cases, and the cleanup node to fulfill the post condition, and as we know all parts of the test suite now, the setup node to fulfill the preconditions, the test cases, and the cleanup node to close the browser at the end, we are actually ready to run the entire test suite. So let me select the test suite and press on Start Test Run. At the end of the test run, we get the error notification again. While I was observing the test run, a suspicion formed in my mind. To me, it looked like the browser disappeared during the test run. The browser was started, then some clicks were performed, the browser disappeared again, then it popped up and another series of clicks were performed, and then the browser was closed. Perhaps you noticed that too. So let's take a look into the run log to see what was going on. And if I open the test suite, the test set node in the run log, I see that the structure of the run log looks different to the structure of the test suite. So we see that the first node is the setup to open the browser, which was expected. Then we see the first test case being executed. And now we see the cleanup node to stop the browser and the setup node to start the browser again. After that, the second test case appears, and then the browser has been stopped again. And this run log confirms my suspicion. So the browser disappeared in between because it was closed and started. This observation is a very important concept of QFTest. A setup node inside a test set will be executed before every test case, in order to ensure that the environment is really prepared. The cleanup node of a test set will be executed after every test case, in order to ensure that the environment will be cleaned and that the environment will be left correctly again. So setup and cleanup node are executed around every test case once they are placed at the test set level. This concept allows the tester to design independent test cases and could make the test execution more robust, because every test case will find a clean environment. You can also think about putting test data preparation steps into those nodes. In other videos on that channel, you will meet another concept of managing pre and post conditions, but for now we go ahead with that concept. Coming to the last part of this section, we shall look at the capabilities to create reports presenting the test results. A QF test run log contains every executed step, including error messages and screenshots in case of failure. This run log needs to be opened within QF test. And now you can use the run log to generate an overview report via the file create report command. Then you get a dialog which you simply confirm, and so you can create an HTML report presenting the test results on a web page to you. So on the left you see a summary about the test suite, the test system where you have executed the tests and so on. In the center you see a pie chart about the overall test result. On the right you see a legend describing the meaning of the icons inside the report. And then you see the overall result. So here we see that one error happened. On the right we see that 2 test cases have been executed. One test case contained an error, another one was successful. We see the success rate of 50% and we see the duration of the execution. The more you walk down the page, the more details you will get. So below the overall result, you will find the test set overview. Then you will find the overview of test sets and test cases. Then you will find the overview of all the errors, the error message, including links to the screenshots. And finally, you will also end up in the details of the test case, showing the test case name and the test steps, again with their duration. And if an error occurred, you see the error message and the links to the screenshot. Those overview reports can be generated either in the HTML format, as I have shown you now, or in an XML format, or in a JUnit XML format. The JUnit XML format is often used to upload and integrate the QF test results to any continuous integration tool. And so we have reached the end of this video about working with a sample test suite in section 10 of the Web UI testing QF test video tutorial. So we have loaded the sample test suite from the QF test installation folder. We opened the browser. We took a look at the test cases. We opened the run log to see the error message and the screenshot in case of an error. We have seen how to get support and how to get help from the help menu, as well as using the online search and the what's this context menu. Then we stopped the browser. We executed the entire test run. And from there, we created a report after opening the run log. The next section, section 11, is about creating a test suite on our own. So we will start performing the necessary steps ourselves. I'm looking forward to it.